Hello dear listeners, our today's topic is on: is Argentina making a comeback? Argentina's story is one of resilience, tragedy, and paradox. There's a famous saying, often attributed to Nobel Prize-winning economist Simon Kuznets: the four types of economies in the world are developed, underdeveloped, Japan, and Argentina. While Japan deserves its own story another day, today, we shine the spotlight on Argentina, a country once among the wealthiest globally, now grappling with a new experiment in radical governance under President Javier Milei. To understand why Milei's policies are making waves far beyond Argentina's borders, we first need to unpack the paradox of this nation. Argentina went from incredible wealth in the early 20th century to becoming a cautionary tale of economic mismanagement, caught in a repeating cycle of growth followed by crisis for over a century. The paradox of Argentina, a century of decline. In the early 1900s, Argentina was thriving. Its fertile plains and booming agriculture made it a top exporter of beef, wheat, and other commodities. Its cities were modernizing, foreign investment was pouring in, and trade made up a staggering 80% of its GDP. Back then, Argentina rivaled countries like France and Germany in wealth, and its capital, Buenos Aires, earned the moniker Paris of South America. But everything changed with the 1929 Great Depression. Global demand for agricultural exports collapsed, and Argentina, overly reliant on foreign trade, was caught completely unprepared. The sudden economic contraction exposed deep vulnerabilities. Trade as a share of GDP plummeted, never fully recovering. Then came political instability, a series of military coups, populist governments, and ideological flip-flops. Each regime brought a fresh wave of nationalizations, privatizations, and renationalizations, frustrating and scaring off foreign investors. I am not kidding when we say they were frustrated. Once Argentina had 5 presidents in a matter of 11 days, that's how bad things were. To appease a struggling population, successive governments turned to massive spending on subsidies, welfare, and bloated public sector jobs. But these populist measures came at a cost. Inflation soared as the government printed money to fund its programs. There are stories of shopkeepers changing the prices of their products daily to keep up with their inflating currency. The Argentine peso devalued repeatedly, losing public trust. Over time, unofficial currency markets flourished, offering a more realistic exchange rate than the government's controlled rate. This dual exchange system reflected a deep mistrust in the state's ability to manage its finances. Even the international markets had lost faith in Argentina. After all, you really don't keep high expectations from a country that has defaulted 9 times in its history on its debt and currently has the highest debt owed to the IMF by more than double that of the second most indebted country. Too many factors, too many failures. If anyone claims to know the exact reason for Argentina's decline, they're probably oversimplifying or not being honest. A mix of internal mismanagement, external shocks, and deep-rooted structural problems has shaped Argentina's journey. What we've shared here is just the surface of a much more complex story. The real picture involves countless interconnected factors. By the time Javier Milei stepped onto the stage, Argentina's economy was in shambles. Inflation had soared into triple digits, half the population was living below the poverty line, and the country was drowning in debt, including billions owed to international creditors like the IMF. Enter Javier Milei, a radical prescription. In late 2023, Javier Milei won the presidency by defying conventional wisdom. He had one of the most depressing political campaigns. His campaign wasn't about promising hope or prosperity, it was a bitter pill of reality. He declared that Argentina couldn't afford to kick the can down the road any longer. His proposals were stark: cut subsidies, shrink the bloated public sector, deregulate industries, and potentially dollarize the economy. Why would people vote for such a grim vision? Perhaps because they were fed up. Decades of traditional policies had failed, and someone, crazy enough to rip everything apart and start anew felt like a gamble worth taking. Milei branded his approach as necessary shock therapy, an economic and political restart. A year in, what's changed? 1 year is too short a time to judge economic policies, but excuse us for our stupidity. We still want to give a very brief overview of what's changed since December 2023. Since taking office, Milei has slashed government spending by 30%. More than 30,000 public sector workers have been laid off, energy and transport subsidies have been eliminated, and public works projects have been suspended. Pensions and state wages have been frozen. The immediate effect: inflation has dropped dramatically. In December 2024, prices rose by just 2.7% month-on-month, compared to 25.5% in December 2023. Argentina's primary budget, excluding interest payments, is now in surplus for the first time in over a decade. However, the reality on the ground is less rosy. Poverty. Over 53% of Argentines now live below the poverty line, up from 42% just a year ago. Consumer spending. Down by 20% as purchasing power shrinks. Construction activity. Plummeted by 29% year-on-year. While inflation has eased, essential goods, particularly those dependent on now-removed subsidies, have seen staggering price hikes. Transport and energy costs have surged by over 300% and 400%, respectively. The Naomi Klein perspective. Naomi Klein, in her book The Shock Doctrine, argues that times of crisis often serve as opportunities to push through radical reforms without public consent. She cites examples like Chile under Pinochet, post-invasion Iraq, and the Asian financial crisis to show how such reforms often exacerbate inequality. Critics of Milei's policies echo this concern, warning that his reforms could widen the gap between Argentina's wealthy elite and its struggling majority. Is the experiment working? Evaluating Milei's presidency depends on one's economic perspective. Free market enthusiasts hail his radical approach as a bold experiment in deregulation and fiscal discipline. They see the potential for Argentina to break free from its cycle of debt and inflation. On the other hand, proponents of state intervention criticize the human cost of his austerity measures, pointing to rising poverty and social unrest. Milei's economic gamble remains precarious. While the numbers show progress in inflation and fiscal discipline, the structural issues, weak industries, labor market rigidity, and reliance on commodities, persist. Moreover, public tolerance for short-term pain has its limits, and without tangible improvements in living standards, patience could wear thin. The road ahead. Argentina's story is one of resilience, tragedy, and paradox. From the heights of prosperity to the depths of economic despair, its history offers lessons for the world. Whether Javier Milei's radical reforms can rewrite the country's narrative remains uncertain. For now, Argentina watches, waits, and hopes that this gamble will pay off. As spectators, we leave it to you to decide whether this bold experiment is the bitter medicine Argentina needed, or just another chapter in its long story of economic mismanagement. Next topic. Hyundai and Kia are facing rising emissions in India due to their SUV-heavy lineups and slow progress in adopting electric vehicles, EVs. While they have plans to produce EVs locally, challenges like affordability and limited charging infrastructure may make it harder for them to meet India's green goals. Next topic. Tata Electronics has become a major player in Apple's supply chain, now producing 26% of India's iPhone output in 2024. The company's revenue hit 40,000 crore rupees, thanks to a 180% surge in production. Next topic. Vedanta Limited is planning to split into 5 separate businesses to tackle its parent company's debt and aim for higher market valuations. Subscribe to Vishwakal, a newsletter where we do a quick daily wrap-up of what happened in the markets, both in India and globally. Thank you for watching. Do share this with your friends and make them as smart as you are. Join the discussion on today's edition here.